ShelleyLyme has raised an issue about my criticism of Suella Braverman. It's something that she's raised a number of times, and I think really I have to address it. And I have called Suella Braverman's behaviour evil, and I have not at any point tried to associate her with the Holocaust by claiming that she has blood on her hands. She has blood on her hands. It's not because of the Holocaust. And the context of Joe Cox and David Ames is quite different. It becomes very, very odd if you cannot criticise a senior politician without being similarly criticised for stirring up hatred. I don't want to stir up hatred, and I certainly don't want any politician to end up in the same situation as Joe Cox or David Ames. But to put this in more in greater context, the concentration camp is not an exclusive issue of the Nazi Germany's exposition of it. I mean, it reaches apogee. It reaches its sinister reality with the World War II and the extermination of Jews, political dissidents, and other groups who were judged to be undesirable. And but it goes back to the Spanish-Cuban War and the Boer War, where camps were used to detain civilians. I think the terminology of a concentration camp comes from the Boer War and from the British. And it's, although there's the notorious association, the reality of keeping people in a camp is reprehensible and leads to problems. And in the same way that Suella Braverman has blood on her hands for her overview of Manston, so too the present administration of Israel, and particularly Netanyahu, has blood on his hands and is, I think, guilty of war crimes for his siege of Gaza, which in many ways has been approached as a sort of particularly 19th century style concentration camp. The Manston facility in Kent was used for the initial processing and temporary holding of asylum seekers who arrived in the UK, generally in small boats across the Channel. It was overcrowded. Reports talked about severe overcrowding, particularly in the final days of Priti Patel's tenure as Home Office Minister. And Suella Braverman was alerted to this when she came into the job, and she chose not to do anything. And thousands of migrants were being held in a facility designed for a much smaller number. The conditions were described as appalling, with inadequate sanitation, food, medical care, leading to severe health risks for the detainees and the incidence of serious disease. And legal experts and human rights organisations criticised the conditions, suggesting that they might breach both domestic law and international human rights standards. And Suella Braverman, the then Home Secretary, faced intense criticism for her handling of the situation. She was accused of failing to properly oversee and manage the facility that led to it being dangerously overcrowded, and she didn't stop that. Under her watch, conditions deteriorated to the point where they posed significant health risks to detainees, including outbreaks of diphtheria. Her delayed action was criticised for delaying the transfer of migrants to other facilities. It exacerbated the overcrowding and the poor conditions, and her public statements and her attitudes towards asylum seekers were inflammatory, lacking in compassion, contributing to the hostile environment, which of course was one that Theresa May set up in the first place. The human rights violations at Manston and the failures in management were a danger to the people who were held there and to the people who were guarding them. And it wasn't helped by James Cleverley's dismissive approach to cartoons. Braverman's stance and her policies have strained our relationships with countries like Albania, like Pakistan, and the broader EU, where so Albania and Pakistan particularly, from which migrants originate, complicating the diplomatic efforts at a time of international tension. Braverman was in a position to do something positive. Actually, she inflamed the problem. Her actions, her inactions at Marston are genuinely about blood on her hands, as indeed the barge, the Stockton barge that is anchored where an Albanian man committed suicide. The health hazards, the intentionally poor conditions had a serious impact on health, safety, and the consequences of these led to death and severe illness. There is no way that one can eradicate Suella or excuse Suella Braverman's appalling inaction and behaviour, and I certainly don't intend to do so. And I've spoken many times about Joe Cox and David Amis, and to link those to this debate is a sort of infantile, really, because you can't criticize somebody if you're worried about the effects of the response. You've got to criticize. You've got to call out wrongdoing, and it's not personal spite at all about Braverman, and ShelleyLyme should if she's been such a follower of my channel, she should go back and look at the comments that I made when Suella Braverman was first appointed. I was extremely positive about her, and I don't think it's grossly irresponsible to call out her madness and her ideology as being thoroughly wrong. And I don't think that that what I'm saying is intended to inflame any member of the public. I'm going to quote here, the Prof's grossly irresponsible behaviour, inventing his personal spite against Braverman in this way in a public forum, could quite conceivably get her killed by some inflamed maniac. That's neither my intention nor indeed do I think it's likely to be a result, but it's not. It's certainly not what I would intend. I would simply intend her to shut up, and she has not even. Even what I think is so extraordinary about Suella Braverman is, even out of office, she is still chomping at the bit and snorting her derisory comments about migrants who are here in a state of great personal anxiety, because it isn't right to turn around and say all these migrants are fake. They're not. They're not. A good many of them are perfectly genuine, and they're being held in appalling conditions at the whim of Suella Braverman. And this has not changed with the change of leadership under James Cleverley. It may not even change under Labour. And I will continue to call it out as wrong. It is utterly abhorrent. We are a civilized society, and we should not be treating the vulnerable and the poor as appallingly as we are doing so. And at the same time, the lies, the deceit, and the stupidity of Braverman and her cohort are staggering. This is somebody who should not be given public power again. And I would be only too happy to contribute to her personal security if she bowed out of politics completely. She has been a danger to too many people. And, of course, a danger to herself, maybe.